Hello and welcome everyone. Hi Sophie.
Hello, how are you and how has your week been?
Sorry. In my mind I thought you were talking to Sophie. My week has been uh I don't remember it. Like that's the kind of week I had.
Mine's been a lot of work and preparing for Ramadan by stocking the freezer with different things
Hmm.
and failing at making sambusa again.
Are you planning to lose weight during Ramadan like everybody else and then failing dramatically?
No, I'm planning to not lose weight. I have the opposite problem. I'm
Oh,
trying to.
it's Ramadan. That's like the easiest thing to do.
No, it's not for me. For me, right now, it's really hard to maintain my weight and not lose. So I have the other problem because in Ramadan, you're not eating, and I can't exactly catch up eating post futur. So I lose weight. Like last
So
Ramadan, I accidentally lost a little more than way more than I should have.
what kind of traditions do you have in the East Side?
So there's so many different traditions. Again, it depends on your family.
Hmm.
With us, I don't think we can do a lot of our traditions really because that involves a lot more people gathering. But one thing that I always liked as a kid, which I don't think it's just our side, I think across Saudi does it too, a
Yeah.
gurgan. So that's something where it happens around mid Ramadan, and you have gatherings with a lot of candy and kids fully dressed in traditional clothing. And in my case, it was a specific house where we all gather. And usually the elderly are the ones giving candy, and there's a lot of singing for the kids. I haven't done that in a very long time.
Yeah. Uh, I don't remember like because in the last few years we switched into much lighter meals than we used to when we were growing up. Because I remember I used to have like full tables with everything, and for some reason we used to think like, oh, let's eat everything on the table, literally. And nowadays it's been much better. We keep it much lighter, like trying to actually fast and take
Okay.
benefit out of it. In the past we used to like whatever you thought you were uh, saving on from your eating too much, you just make it up double during breakfast.
No, we I think thankfully our food at our house has always been light and healthy. Ramadan, yes, we actually might fry something where normally we don't fry at all. But I don't think we ever had a problem with that. I do miss some of the sweets that only pop up in Ramadan and a lot of food that for some reason we only do in Ramadan. So that is something I'm looking forward to.
As a kid, we used to have what's called balh al-sham. Uh, I think it has different names. One second. See, now I have prepared a. One second, let me write this down. I have
And
prepared a. To switch to the browser view so people can see what I'm looking at and see all these pictures of Balh al-Sham, the sweets.
yeah, or yeah, as Zophie mentioned, uh, Tumba.
Yeah, Turumba, that's the name I'm trying to remember. How does
Yeah,
that even, how did we come up with that name? I have no idea.
we don't know. There's a lot of really strange names. Uh, if you think about it, a lot of our food names are very funny. But Hasham is like a deep fried dessert. Um,
And then
found all of,
dipped in juicy, sugary syrup.
yeah, yeah. It's not too different from a churro. I guess, in concept. It's just smaller, and I guess you just use different coating. Might
Yeah.
have more like it might come with a pistachio dusting rather than cinnamon, but it's delicious stuff.
So, what is your favorite traditional meal during that's we only see it during Ramadan?
Tashriba.
What's the tashriba?
It's layers of this very crumbly thin bread, and you put with it a lot of vegetables in between, and sometimes meat or chicken. But we tend to make it vegetarian. Yeah, it just looks like this kind of stew, I guess, but it's like a stew with bread layers. A savory bread pudding.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Alright, I'm sharing it on
That's
the.
not how we make it, but yeah, all of that kind of variation, and I think it's delicious. But we only make it in Ramadan. Um, Something that isn't only Ramadan, but I'm looking forward to right now because the fridge is full of it. Ready-made stuff to make for dolma. So that's something
Oh,
else.
what?
Dolma.
Durma? What's that?
Dolma.
I
With a lamb.
Dulma.
Yeah. I suppose it's similar to waraganab, which is stuffed vine leaves, but instead of it being served cold, it's served hot. Sometimes we make it spicy, and
Okay.
it come with onion and other things.
Use
Stuffed.
zucchini or
No. It's vine leaves, just like stuffed vine leaves.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, vine leaves are it's such a great meal to have. It's uh, it's a bit acidic if that's the correct word that comes to my mind. I don't know why.
I mean, you do make it with lemon and
Yeah,
yeah,
a lot of lemon
but
in it.
you can also make it spicy.
All right. So speaking of food and the life that comes with food, how about we start with chapter 2?
Yeah, we finished chapter 1 last time, and now we're in chapter 2 of the Adventurer's Guide to Zakhara, which is called Life in Town. Want me to start out?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Zakhara's people are divided into two broad groups: the nomads, or al-Badia, and the city dwellers, or al-Hadar. This chapter focuses on the latter. While the nomads dwell primarily in the high romantic desert plateaus, al-Hadar, for the most part, inhabit Zakhara's lowlands and coasts. It is cooler and wetter there, with frequent morning fogs and heavy but brief rains during the monsoon season. Life is not driven by the search for water and green grass, as it is for the nomads, though irrigation and wells are still required for agriculture. In general, the people of Zakhara's settlements have easy access to water and other basic necessities, things the nomads hold so dear. Al-Hadar are sedentary as well as settled. A man often lives in the same house as his father, and in the same community as his grandfather. There is a greater sense of continuity here than in the desert, with the buildings and businesses offering proof of man's ability to tame the land. Trade is more established in the settlements, which often have souks, which are covered markets, in addition to open bazaars. The population is more highly concentrated here than in the wild lands, giving rise to stronger rules of order and law. Zakhara's al-Hadar also are more cosmopolitan than the desert dwellers, for they have been exposed to foreign visitors. Traders from far-off lands rarely venture into the inhospitable desert, but they frequently visit Zakhara's great cities. As a result, al-Hadar have gained a more broader, practical outlook. While they are often referred to as city dwellers in the text below, Zakhara's al-Hadar live in settlements of all sizes, from the crudest collection of mud brick hovels to the golden towers of Hudud, the city of delights. From the perspective of al-Badia, their lives are the same, soft, sedentary, and restricted. Indeed, the similarities between Al-Hadar who live in a village and those who live in a great city far outweigh the differences.
So we have it's just this chapter begins with establishing the major differences between the Al-Badiya, the Bedouins, and Al-Hadar, the city folk or the city dwellers. Like the word Hadar means present, someone who's there, compared to Al-Badiya, who's someone who's always traveling around. So this is why anyone from a small city, a small town, to a big city they're all called Hadar. If you look at the picture on the left side, do you see it?
Yeah.
It's an orc who's getting a haircut
and a pedicure.
A pedicure, and there are flies next to his feet, and the guy has something to close his nose. Oh man!
I mean, it's interesting that it's an orc. I think the flies are a little bit.
Yeah, it's an old school view on how orcs are.
Yeah. But hey, in the chapter about life in town, they showed an orc, which, they could have just showed a human.
Sure.
So there's that.
All right, so next we have the daily routine. A day in the life of a typical city dweller begins with dawn breaking over the rooftops. Those who are not already awake are aroused by the sound of gongs in the minarets and the morning call to prayer. So they're switching the prayer call with gongs instead. Al-Hadar, who are very religious, and those seeking favor of the priests, if not the gods, are already at the mosque by this time. For most, however, the morning call involves prostrating oneself to one's chosen deity at home and reflecting upon one's chosen path and asking for guidance. This is basically like how we Muslims, some of us go to the mosque to pray, and some of us pray in private.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it mentions here seeking the favor of the priests, it's not the gods. It's kind of highlighting some hypocrisy going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I'm all for variety in it, but it's kind of setting it as a precedence, which, if that's the case, then I'd rather it be set plainly. It's something you can play with, I guess.
Yeah, if they just stuck with seeking favor of the gods, that would have been fine. But adding the priests is just it changes the tone a little bit to me.
Especially when you're introducing the world, it kind of makes it sound like the hypocrisy is rampant. Unless you were to say seeking favor of the gods, later on say some may use this to seek favor with the priest instead, and for other different reasons. That kind of makes it a possibility rather than the norm.
Yeah. To be fair, I would absolutely have someone who is appearing religious and goes to the the typical person who goes to the temple and prays and do all the good religious stuff, but in reality they're a hypocrite. But it would not be something just mentioned like that. It would be someone who is a rarity, not a common thing, or not an expected thing.
Yeah, it's kind of how you want to establish the world, and then you break the rules, or you show exceptions.
Yeah.
Or
like maybe a specific town or a specific culture within the whole culture. Specific group of people who do that, and they're well known to be pretentious.
Or maybe people using religion for political power, which happens everywhere in the world.
True. All right. No one may be unclean before prayer to an enlightened God, enlightened deity. Ablution is required. See Patterns of Worship in Chapter 5. Servants of the wealthy carry fresh water to their masters' chambers about an hour before dawn, while others wash with ewers of water that were filled the night before. Most Zakharan men shave, and they do so at this time. Breakfast is usually foods served cold: bread, curd, cheese, olives, and dates. Among the poor, a few dates may suffice. Those who are more prosperous may eat bread smeared with jams and preserves. During cool weather or in high altitudes, the morning menu may include soup. Rich or poor, nearly every Zakharan drinks a bit of dark, bitter coffee with breakfast. After the meal, it is customary to wipe one's teeth with a cloth. Okay, so the first part was regarding wudu, and it points to the chapter 5 about pattern of worship, which I think we'll just leave that for when we get to it.
Yeah. And then the second breakfast.
At the end of it, it's mentioned that most Saharan men shave, which, like in Islam, it's mostly encouraged the other way around, to let it loose. So I think they're trying to. Oh no, we're not. We're not doing the same thing. See, people here are shaving. Are encouraged to shave.
Yeah, or maybe they just took it as, that we're going with the idea of cleanliness, so clean shaven. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe went a little too literal.
The touch about the meals and everything, that's nice.
And they're describing basically the breakfast that's very common till today here, which is Nawaf, translated to dry.
The point about coffee, just it establishes that coffee is accessible to everyone. So this is, I'm curious on how they bring it up later, like if they touch on commerce, how expensive or how affordable coffee is, because everybody, nearly everyone drinks coffee, which is rich or poor. So coffee should be very accessible. But how is it really? I hope there is no contradiction, because I like the idea that coffee is everywhere.
I like it too, because it brings in the idea of how coffee shops were an accessible way for people to learn and gain knowledge. They were in Europe. They were called penny universities because you could just go in and, for the cost of a coffee, sit next to a scholar and learn from them, or just listen into conversation. So I do like that accessibility. And here you're in a world with magic. So you don't have to stick so much to historical accuracy to say, well, in this time, coffee would have been probably rare. But you have magic here. So that could have been used to make coffee very accessible, and it might just be differing qualities, where you have the more ostentatious types looking for specific rare coffees, and then the rest just having the equivalent of instant coffee.
Well, without even adding magic to the equation, if the culture has found this bean is very important to them, they would invest a lot of studying, and the agricultural technology would be focused on this bean. So they would be able to cultivate it much better than anyone else, and it would be much easier and cheaper within time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, the Al-Hadar turn to their work. Merchants travel to their stalls or stores. Artisans go to their shops, which may be located at the front of their houses. Public functionaries go to the court or the bazaar to monitor and tax transactions of the day. Women, in the traditional role of wife and mother, turn to matters of the household, tending to children and preparing the evening meal, which is the traditional old school way of looking at women.
I'm not really fond of that, because what this does is add a layer that an adventuring woman would be strange. Because, because it didn't say merchants, traditionally men, but it did say women, traditional.
In the traditional role. So they're saying that those who are in the traditional role. So I think they added this word. They didn't want to say women, tend to this matter. They said women in the traditional role. So they are. I think they're attempting to say there are women who are not in this traditional role.
Yeah.
But in today's knowledge, we know there are better ways to do that, which is not
Yeah, you
mentioning at
could just
all.
simply move it and it doesn't really do much.
Yeah.
Like if you're not saying there are no housewives.
Of course. Like if somebody's gonna be at home taking care of the house, it doesn't have to be the woman. It could be the
Exactly.
husband, could be the father, it could be the grandfather, grandparents who are just
Yeah.
hanging out at home. There are different ways to handle this.
Yeah, so if removing it kind of does the same thing, you know? It's simple enough.
Yeah. In rural areas, the chief occupation is agriculture. In urban areas, the majority of Al-Hadar devote themselves to weaving, sewing, and selling textiles. Wood is at premium throughout most of the land of fate, so the preponderance of goods in the bazaar are either metal or made of woven fabric. So this is just restating the desert weather and desert the desert geography of the land, which makes it very difficult for wood to be usable more than firewood. But there's the ruined kingdoms just literally next door. So I don't see how it's so difficult to bring wood. Maybe it's because it's the path is going to be difficult to bring it from there.
I mean, it made it sound like the Ruined Kingdoms are not exactly a place where trade has been easily established to take care of any resources there. So, it's not that they're saying there is no wood. It's just that it's not the common job that people have working with wood. The common job is working with textiles.
True, and it's easier to work with textiles and mining in the general area of Zakhara than bringing wood from specifically the ruined kingdoms.
Yeah.
All right. 2 hours past midday, a gong sounds. The imams or priests in their minarets again call the faithful to prayer. In some major cities, it is sufficient to face a mosque with a bowed head and utter silent prayer. This half-hearted effort is frowned upon by most moralists, however, who feel a visit to the mosque is required. So the moralists don't like this quick prayer. Some people do. They are expecting people to go and attend the prayer at the mosque. I'm assuming 2 hours past midday is probably Asr.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
After prayer, it is time for lunch, and many of the open-air markets close against the heat of the sun. For those who can reach home, lunch usually consists of the reheated remains of the previous evening's supper, often made into a soup or ragout. Ragout?
Ragu.
What's a ragout?
Ragu. A ragu is when you would just take vegetables and meat and then cook it together. It kind of becomes like a stew kind of thing. So let's say you just had roasted carrots and roasted potatoes and some chicken. You put it and make it with kind of like a thin broth, and you can have it with rice.
Okay.
The in Arabic for it, I'm forgetting it, but when I remember, I'll bring it up.
All right. Those whose businesses keeps them away from home may carry with them an onion, dates, and some bread from a midday snack, or they may purchase a bit of stew from a cook shop or a peddler. So yeah, I think like if you're poor or you're trying to save money, you would bring some dates on you, just save until you manage to come home and have dinner with your family. Otherwise, if you have a few pennies, a few copper pieces to spend, you would probably get a cook shop, and they would have some who are extremely cheap ones. Like maybe a meal for 2 or 3 would be 1 copper, like very simple soup.
Mhm.
The afternoon schedule for the Al-Hadar, I hate saying that, for the Al-Hadar, for Al-Hadar is much the same as the mornings. To escape the heat, some engage in business meetings and commerce in the souk, a market sheltered by traps or rooftops high overhead. For others, the early part of the afternoon is a time of leisure. Some visit the hammam, which is the bathhouse. Others relax and enjoy the diversions of the marketplace. So I'm assuming those others are just sitting at the coffee shops right now.
Yeah.
Bazaars and other public squares usually have areas set aside for spontaneous public speaking. Those who wish to teach, harangue, or enlighten the masses may do so quite freely. Travelers tell great discoveries, hakimas and dervishes describe their wondrous encounters. On the more practical side, the arrivals of ships are also announced in these open-air forums. All is permitted within reason, according to the laws and customs of the area. Blasphemous, obscene, or revolutionary speech is forbidden, of course, and the city guards remain nearby to handle malcontents. Further, even the most exemplary caliph retains a few priests who are armed with silence, so that heathen speech need never offend the enlightened. So, what level is silence in 5e? Is it first or second level?
I think it's second, not first. Let me quickly look it up. And it's a 20-foot radius, and it's second level. So it's here. It says that it's a 15-foot radius spell. So silence has had some changes to it.
So such cleric would be at least a third level cleric.
Yeah.
Second level spells. So that keep that in mind when you're trying to make those such law enforcement clerics. Well, actually, gonna be law domain clerics. All right. Entertainers are also common sights in the bazaar. These include poets, tale tellers, musicians, and young dancers. The dancers frequently arrive with their own musicians. Other dancers may accompany themselves with drums, tambourines, or wooden clackers, or by hissing pleasantly as they dance. Hissing or whistle? I would imagine whistling, but hissing?
Yeah. No, hissing is strange. Hissing. How do you hiss pleasantly? Like, that's a question I have. How do you hiss pleasantly?
I have no idea. I don't know. I think they probably saw something and they described it as hissing.
Yeah, and this would have been nicer to describe some local instruments, because there are, for instance, al-oud. This could be a great way to bring it up here. It's sort of like I'm not sure if it's the same, but it looks a little bit similar to a sitar. There's a lot of other instruments that could come in here.
Yeah,
maybe
true.
not sing.
All right. Okay, we have. Most entertainers will agree to perform at a private engagement in exchange for the promise of an evening meal. The truly talented, however, may catch the eye of a high-ranking courtier and be commanded to perform before the local caliph or emir. Thereafter, such entertainers will be able to demand high prices for their performances. With the approach of sunset, most of those working in the city or town return home for the evening meal. Whatever their standing, the enlightened Al-Hadar wash before eating. Where appropriate, the master of the household says a grace thanking the gods for the family's bounty and good fortune. Okay, you want to pick up the next one?
Yeah. Okay. Um, the next is the evening meal is the largest of the day. Among members of the upper class, it may consist of a number of courses, especially when guests are present. A low stool forms the base of a large tray that is brought from the kitchen. The tray is laden with plates and bowls, which are overflowing with meat, rice, and flatbread. A number of courses are served in quick succession: ragouts, pilafs, and soups. It is a special occasion. Wine or kumis may be served, though not in the pantheist league. Dessert consists of candies and spiced or sweet coffee. But actually, like that tray with the bowls and things, it is like in my head, I'm getting the right images of what they're trying to describe, which is pretty cool. And halal, who are not as wealthy, eat a dinner of fewer courses, though this is still the largest meal of the day. They devour a good deal more rice and far less meat than the upper class. Though dessert may be skipped, coffee is not. Again, coffee is always there. In a wealthy household, a servant may prepare the coffee after the meal. However, it nearly always the hosts who actually serve the coffee. A ruler might appoint someone else to the task, such as a favorite son. This is a ceremonious affair in which the host takes great pleasure and pride. In traditional households, men dine separately from women, who take their meal in the harem after the men who have been fed. In more liberal and cosmopolitan areas, men and women eat together. A servant or slave, or the youngest wife in a polygamous household, may bring the trays. Okay.
I have a point about the rice having more rice than meat.
Yeah.
Rice isn't easily cultivated in the desert. I think it needs a lot of water. So we get it from we usually get it from India and China.
Yep, I used to work at a company that sells rice, and it is not really commonly grown here. We do have some local fields, obviously, but it's very water intensive, as you've said, and that is not easy here.
So what I think is they would use more flour-based meals, because flour would be easier to find, easier to create here, and
yeah,
like we have a meal which is basically flour mixed with meat, harissa.
Yep.
So that's the kind of meal more than anything. Like rice would be a delicacy.
Yeah,
brought from elsewhere. Rice would be brought from somewhere in the Irwin Kingdoms because it needs a lot of water.
Yeah, but I think they just focused on the traditional foods that are prevalent today.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah, not really what would have made sense agriculturally. And yes, even if meat might not have been still easy accessible by the poor, there was still a lot of other options to add in. And I think that could be a fun thing to add as like a whole menu of what to actually include.
Sure. Because there hasn't been any mention of flour-based meals, which we do have.
Yeah.
All right. Before we go on, somebody mentioned, Zophie mentioned snake jazz for the pleasant hissing.
Yeah.
So, yes, that. So right now, the only instance that comes to my mind with a pleasant hissing would be a yuan ti dancer. So yes, go ahead with that.
Why not?
You can continue here.
Okay. So there was the part about, the ceremonious affair of serving coffee. And I do think that is something that's a big part of our culture. Exactly how you pour the coffee and how well you pour it. You're not supposed to pour too much. You're supposed to pour just enough. The idea being,
I think you got cut off. So I think we lost her for a second.
oh,
Okay,
my
you're
back.
back.
What did you hear? What I said?
I think you started talking about the coffee and then.
Oh, okay.
So start from the beginning.
Okay, I'm sorry about the connection, but yeah, the coffee with us is a ceremonial affair to give with with any guest that you have. If you were to overserve it as in overfill the cup more than you should, it's like you're telling your guest, "This is the coffee you're getting. Shut up. That's enough for you." You're supposed to just serve halfway, so that the idea is you keep serving more as you go.
Yeah, these kind of tidbits are kind of useful for during the game if you are visiting someone, and
Yeah,
you can give them hints through this kind of behavior. So you're
yeah,
giving coffee, and the cups are full to the rim, which signifies that finish your coffee and leave.
yeah. Roll performance to see how well you pour the coffee.
Oh, all right. A sleight of hand. Yeah, I think that's the proper one. Probably performance rather than sleight of
Yeah.
hand.
Oh God, I'm getting ideas for my Ramadan one shot. But I think the point that I'd probably just do away with is the whole I mean, gender segregation in a campaign can just add unfun elements to play, and that's kind
Yeah.
of where I.
In today's time and age, it's not a playable concept as much.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it's not table friendly.
yeah, it's not about historical accuracy or any of these things. What's fun to play? This really isn't.
And just so you know, there are many Arab cultures which the gender segregation in the household doesn't exist. Like
Yep.
cousins and siblings, they're just all together in the same room. It's fine. They don't make a taboo out of it.
Yeah,
So
I
you
grew up
have
with
you have
comedy.
historical accuracy there if you want to go with that.
Yeah, and it's really what you want to take and what's fun. So we have more on food.
Yeah.
And Hada rarely use dining utensils. Spoons are an exception, but these are seen primarily in the cities of Hiyal and Qudra, where people eat a good deal of soup. Most food is eaten with the fingers or scooped up with pieces of flatbread. Civilized people always eat with the right hand, unless they have been maimed. To do otherwise is a serious breach of etiquette. Many Aaron's tale begin with describing a guest who eats a meal with his left hand. When his host demands an explanation, the man reveals that his right hand has been rendered useless or completely severed. This, in turn, leads to the story of how the man came to be in his wretched state.
Yeah, I offend a lot of people by because I am a city dweller, unlike my entire lineage. I struggle a lot with eating rice with my hand. Scooping it is possible, but it's impossible not to make a mess beneath me. So yeah, it's an art. It's an art.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, I've never eaten with my hand, to be honest. I do have some distant uncles that have made fun of me for that. But honestly, I didn't grow up with this, and neither did most of my family. It's a bit far more traditional.
I would avoid eating a lot when I'm trying to maintain an image that I know how to eat with my hands. So I I eat as little as I can so I don't make a mess, and just leave the messes when I get back home, and then use my spoon.
Yeah. So, and I do find it interesting as a way of, like, if you are going to include the use of the right hand and the maimed hand, that could be a way to introduce an NPC whose hand is maimed, and to play off on this.
Just keep in mind, like, this is not going to be something you're going to be mentioning every session, but it's going to be a
Yeah.
unique situation where you notice that this person is eating with their left hand.
Exactly, and then how they react, depending, of course, on each character and their views. They might ask, and then you see him maybe bring up his maimed hand, and that leads to a whole adventure story. So that could be a fun way to introduce an NPC. Right? Following the evening meal, family members wash their hands. Then they may gather to tell tales or enjoy small entertainments, often religious in nature. Al-Hadar who engage in evening crafts or businesses typically do so at this time. Okay, I actually find it funny where they're pointing out family members wash their hands. Like, as opposed to,
Not?
like, it's a point to say where you're saying they don't wash their hands because X, but I know though that they're trying to emphasize this culture of cleanliness.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to bring up.
Yeah, it's like saying, and so eventually people go to the bathroom at one point during the day. Like,
It's like Spider-Ham in the Spider-Verse movie. He came to introduce himself. His hands are wet, and he said, "My hands are wet because I just washed them." There is no other reason for that. There is no other reason for them to be wet except that.
it makes you just question, like, okay, you were emphasizing a little too much.
All right.
2 hours after the sun touches the horizon, the gongs of the local mosque sound for the third and last time of the day. This signals the commencement of evening prayer. Citizens are not expected to visit a mosque. Evening prayers should take place in the home. Afterwards, most Al-Hadar retire for the evening. Some try to finish handiwork by the light of an oil lamp. The night watch is active too, patrolling the streets to seek out nefarious characters. Most Zakharan cities observe a curfew, during which no one is permitted to wander the streets. The curfew begins an hour after the evening prayer, lasting until 2 hours before the dawn. Those who are found wandering the streets during this time should be prepared to explain themselves, either to the night watch or later next day to a qadi, judge. Through the passage of time and seasons, the routine of Al-Hadar varies little. The sound of the gongs provide a framework and a constant rhythm of their daily lives. Outsiders, especially desert dwellers, view Al-Hadar as clockwork automatons, trapped in the same rut throughout their lives. While it is true that some Al-Hadar are prisoners of their routine, most find it reassuring that their time passes in an ordered fashion. This shows that all is correct beneath the eyes of the gods, under the watchful and beneficent, I forgot how to pronounce that, rule of the Grand Khalif.
All right. Would you keep this curfew in your game? Because I don't think I would.
I'd only keep it if this was a city that had an exceptionally high crime, and then I want to use that crime element, and I obviously expect my characters to break the curfew.
I would have it like a cultural expectation that anyone goes out after this point is kind of suspicious. Like, why are you out at this time of day? So guards would definitely stop you and question you, like, where are you going? What are you doing at this time?
Yeah.
Because normally people won't be outside. But I wouldn't put it to the point of a curfew.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it in all cities, but if I had a city that currently has some crime and they're trying to keep people safe, and this was a way to do it. So, for instance, a series of crimes that only happen at night. I did have a town in my game that implemented a curfew as a way to minimize crime and to try to catch the wrongdoer. And it did create for some fun scenarios and shenanigans for my players. So it is something I'd use, but only if it is relevant to the story and creates a fun challenge.
I think I've read somewhere that, in fact, that crime is more occurs more often during daylight than at
Yeah,
night.
it has to be relevant. So let's say in my game I had kidnappings that only happened at night. And so to minimize kidnappings, they had people stay on a curfew. So it has to make sense. If the crimes happen in the morning, then what's the curfew for, really? Unless there's another hidden reason there's a curfew. Like, it has to make sense because the players will pick up on it, and their first question will be, why is there a curfew?
Okay, so the study says that most crimes committed during day, but the violent ones happen during nighttime.
Mm-mm.
So yeah, I would definitely, like, if something big happened, a spree of murders or something, like they can't catch the person who's doing this, they might establish a curfew until this is resolved.
Yeah.
Okay, do we have anything else we want to point out here, or do we move on to the next?
I think we can move on.
Okay, so leadership. The ultimate spiritual and temporal leader of all enlightened Zakharans is Grand Khalif Khalil al-Asad al-Zahir, scourge of the unbelievers. He follows in the footsteps of his father and his father's father before him, being the 18th man in his bloodline to ascend the enlightened throne. The first Khalif who discovered the word of the lawgiver and spread its wisdom throughout the land so many years ago, was hardly more than a boy. He was also a desert nomad, a fact in which enlightened Al-Badiya take great pride. The city where it all began was Golden Huzuz, still home of the Grand Khalif and his wondrous palace. See Hudub in chapter 6 for further details. So his name is Khalil al-Asad al-Zahir, scourge of the unbelievers.
Yeah. Like, that paints a picture, really.
It just pushes further and further the religious extremism of this setting.
Yeah, and I don't really I wouldn't really want to play in this religious extremism. I don't think it's something that is enjoyable to play with. I would tone it down. Yeah. Obviously, you're going to have people that believe vehemently in something, and religious disagreements and all these things that are natural, but I wouldn't really want to play in a setting with such extremism like this. So I wouldn't want scourge of the unbelievers, because you have the leader, the Grand Khalif, with that title. It already sets a whole precedence, and it already establishes the kind of life there.
What is it called when a government ruled by religion?
I forgot the name.
Theocracy.
Yes.
Theocracy. So the most important part of this campaign is that the whole thing is a theocratic. The Grand Khalif or the Grand Sultan is they have their ruler, their authority coming from the fact they are the ones who received the word, they discovered the word of the lawgiver. All right, so next, One step down the hierarchy of power are the rulers of Zakhara's city-states and tiny empires. A collection of kings, caliphs, emirs, padishahs, sultans, khadivs, and the like. Like they just put all these different titles.
All of them, without really any ranking, just all of them.
Because honestly, we don't have rankings, so it makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But it does provide, like, your players are going to ask, so how is he compared to that guy and compared to this guy? So you will need some kind of method to the madness.
Here is the thing. You can't use the same ranking systems from Western culture and the feudalism. So what we do use is measure of power. Two people who can be both are sultans, but their ranking is based on the power influence they have. That's it. It doesn't matter what title they have. It's just how much influence and power or army or money or wealth, whatever they can gather.
That is something that they'll ask, and it can be personalized. Like, oh, this is a small town, so population-wise, there's not that much. But this guy is more powerful than that emir because they have all these resources. Something like that.
True. So the Sultana of Hiyal would have a higher status than the other cities and the other that are further away from the capital. Right. While each pays tribute and taxes to the Grand Khalif, many rule their communities with a surprising degree of independence, which is also another touch of our culture that is there. There is an autonomy between the smaller states compared to the Grand Sultan or the Grand Khalif.
Yeah.
He's not overseeing everything and not controlling everything.
Yeah.
Even lower in the hierarchy of the power are the local qadis. Despite their rank, they may have profound effect on the lives of an average man or woman. Qadis are arbitrators and mediators, pronouncing judgment in virtually all civil and religious disputes. Only the Grand Khalif or other ruler or the ruler the Qadi served may override their decision. Qadis are chosen in one of two ways, by the community or by the ruling bureaucracy. The former is a common practice in settlements that have close ties to the deserts or the nomads. Qadis chosen by the community are often scholars, merchants, or sages who are greatly respected for their wisdom and strength of character. Because they have popular support, they may hold their position indefinitely. Their positions are essentially permanent. Okay, I want to touch on this part. Like the position of Qadi is it's considered something more of a holy state back in the days. It's not something to be taken lightly because people believed if you rule unjustly, this is a straight ticket to hell.
Yes.
So there have been people who would pretend to be mad to avoid this assignment. And so that is why you get a job by a well-known scholar to get a crown of madness for him. You don't know why, but it turns out that he wants it for himself.
Yeah. Yep.
Just to get out of jury duty.
Yeah. And it's more than just jury duty. You're the one who has to decide forever the fate of people's lives.
There was one story, but I can't remember it entirely. So, basically, there's a qadi whose son was also being brought up to be a qadi as well. So, after his father's death, he had a dream. He came to him and warned him and told him, "Son, I am in hell right now. You should not take this position." So he would go around town. He would cut his hair and just sing songs. And he went pretending to be all mad. Maybe his dad died and there's something short in his head. But someone who, the ruler of the city, would have some people having a conversation near him. and he knows the answers to these, like what is the proper ruling. So he would sing them in his fit of madness. So once the ruler figured it out, he brought him in and put him back in his position.
Unsuccessful. The thing is, like, if for a man to show he's that unwilling and be like, nope, back at it. It's like, no, but I don't want to be wise. I do it. Yes.
Okay. Qadis appointed by rulers must answer to the bureaucracy. They may not hold their positions long. Those who fail to placate both the bureaucracy and the community at large are swiftly replaced. For more on Qadis and justice on the civilized lands, see the law in Fortunes and Fates, which we have read previously.
Yeah.
Okay, want to go with land?
Yeah, that brings us to the third part of Chapter 2, Land. Zakhara's Al-Hadar adhere to an established and regular system of agricultural production. Common crops include wheat, maize, rice, where water is most abundant. Haha, there, it's mentioned. Dates, legumes, and citrus fruits. In the terrace plantations of the Pearl cities, fragrant lemons and pomegranates flourish on the lower slopes. High above, coffee grows. Most of Zakhara's agricultural land relies on irrigation. Few areas receive enough rainfall to grow crops without it. In some villages, a single water wheel turned by a donkey may support a small farm no larger than a glorified garden. Near the cities where agriculture occurs on a larger scale, the grand civil works required to irrigate the fields are more than an individual farmer can handle. In the land of fate, the ultimate and official owner of all land is the Grand Khalif. He is granted this land by the gods in exchange for guiding Zakhara's people along the path of enlightenment, in accordance with the law of the lawgiver. In turn, the Grand Khalif grants ownership of the land to petty shahs, sultans, lesser khalifs, and emirs who are to manage the parcels granted and provide for the Grand Khalif's people. These local rulers, in turn, provide grants to still lesser magisters and worthies in large areas or to individual farmers. A farmer's grant commonly states that the farmer will forward a portion of the crops grown or money raised to the creator of the grant. This money takes the form of a tax. Funds raised in this manner are used to create irrigation, ditches, dig new wells, fund public works, and strengthen the city's walls when necessary. They are also used to pay the grant giver's own tax. Oh God. Forward to whoever stands one rung higher on the ladder of ownership. In the cities proper, a similar system applies to space in the souk and in the warehouse district, as well as the facilities that are used for manufacturing or artistry. In other words, through a series of grants, the common merchant, business person, or artisan can obtain a little plot. Okay, this is all the non-adventuring part.
Yeah, it's all politics.
Yeah, it's not just all politics, but it's. I don't know when your players are going to interact with this. I'm not sure if this is something that was common in second edition because maybe players often did have these moments of owning land and settling and all these things. But I don't see this. I don't see any detail like this in 5th edition anymore.
No, like they made it much simpler.
Yeah,
and
I think
keep in mind the setting style is a little bit different than Faerun.
It is, but I don't see this being a necessary part to know.
Yeah.
Like I think knowing that agriculture is difficult and requires these machinery because of irrigation. Yep, I think that's enough.
Brooke says that in 2E players were pretty much always expected to end up with the land by around 9th level, which makes sense because we saw that in the DM's book where like what is expected, they have followers, they have all these things, so a plot of land is expected, and this is kind of giving them a hint of how it works. So if you
Yeah.
wanted to get a land, probably you were going to get it from the Amir of this small town or the Sultan of the region,
And you
or
technically
maybe
don't
or the
own
Grand Sultan himself.
Yeah. It makes sense in that context. This is something I'm glad is lessened in this edition. And that's my personal opinion. I don't think it's something very necessary. I think if your players want to end up owning land, there's ways to do it without all this detail.
Yeah, I mean they're going with the mechanics of the time. Plus,
Yes.
they need to put as much details as possible.
Yeah.
They need to fill up the book, so these are useful stuff for them.
Yeah. No, definitely. Farmers are not bound to the land. They are essentially renters. Few of them own the ground on which they toil. They work solely to earn a livelihood, and much of what they earn goes to the landowner. This is something that was found at different places of the world, not just how it might have been here. I'm not actually aware.
It's still done like this. It's still done like this. So basically, there's the landowners who are originally farmers, and then they would just, after a certain point, they would be able to afford people working for them. So what they mean here are not the farmers, the laborers of the farm. The owner of the farm and the laborers. The laborers are not bound by the land or the farm itself.
Yeah.
They're just hires, and they just do whatever the season they need to be done, and they move on. But whatever is the major profit is just goes to the landowner. They just get paid for their job.
Okay. Yeah, and it does make sense as a setting to play with for players that want to venture into this. And the whole next portion continues to elaborate on taxes and contracts and types of land grants. And
yeah, do you want to skip that?
I think so. I mean, really,
it just goes too much on the
you're gonna play D&D
grants and ownership systems.
Yeah, like, are you gonna play D&D and then okay, I want to play with taxes? I don't think so.
It's just that it's just establishing, because just keep in mind this is a setting book, not just an adventure where you're just going forth. So it's giving you as much details as possible. But we can skip it because it's really about taxes and getting grants and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So, I'll give it to you in short. If you will get to land through the Grand Khalif, Sultan of the region, or the Emir of the city you're in, if it's whatever property you get, you own it, but you're still gonna be paying taxes because the one who gave it to you wants money. So you have to make use of it. Whatever you use it, you have to pay money for it. And that's it.
Yep.
All right, so speaking of that, here's attitudes and customs.
Yeah, the fourth part of this chapter.
The Arabian Adventures rulebook introduces many of the attitudes and cultures themes shared by civilized men and women throughout Zakhara. Themes such as family, hospitality, and propriety. For instances, all Zakharas feel that offering hospitality is a matter of honor. In practice, however, the interpretation of these themes frequently varies between Al-Badiya and Al-Hadar. This section describes the attitudes and ideas that prevail in the Zakhara's settlements, while the text below may paint Al-Hadar with the broadest of strokes. It is, for the most part, true enough to be representative. So, if anybody is asking about these things, you can check the other stream where we went through the Arabian Adventure with Asians represent. We went through all these things. So we have home in the villages, towns, and cities of Zakhara. A love of family is closely linked to a love of one's home. To the nomad, home and family are synonymous. To Al-Hadar, home means having roots and continuity. A safe and constant haven that helps give a person an identity almost as much as his or her family does. Even traders who wander the seas on voyages of many years pay tribute to their hometown. So this is because it's established the the concept of identity for
Yeah.
a Bedouin versus Hadari. Like, if you are, like, for me, living in Jeddah, I closely identify to being Jeddawi from Jeddah. But my Bedouin side is just my tribal lineage and my family and my ancestry. This is, depending on how you grew up, they have more influence on you.
Yeah. No, I do think that the differences in how you can talk about home can bring in this very added layer to each character and how they identify with family and home, and I think that's something fun.
Home also represents familiarity. Given their sedentary tradition, Al-Hadar can usually trace some relationship through blood, marriage, or mutual history and experience that links them to most of the people in their village, town, or city. While such a thin bond may not open the palace doors to a beggar, it does create a sense of community, and it helps Al-Hadar in gathering information, conducting businesses, or merely getting around in their hometown or city. So this is basically everybody knows everybody. This is it. You can't go in there and expect that you would be anonymous. Nope.
Yeah.
The moment you walk in the city, everybody knows who you are.
Yeah, if a PC goes back to their hometown, you have this advantage on all disguise checks. Guess what? That is your aunt's best friend from high school days. And she knows you.
How's your mother?
Coming from a small town, this is felt very deeply.
I want to point out something. Back in Yemen, where I am, in Mukalla Hadramaut. So Mukalla is a really small town. Like, it's a quarter of Jeddah, if not less. Because being such a small city and everyone knows everyone, the Islamic culture says that before marriage, if you want to go marry someone, you have a choice to see each other before marriage. But in Mukalla, they don't do that. Because they are such a close-knit culture, if somebody goes see someone and he doesn't like how she looks, the word just spreads around that she doesn't look nice, even though it's just a matter of taste. So this is kind of how it's such a, it goes on the negative side sometimes to such a weird extreme.
Yeah.
All right, so, next one.
Nice. But before we move on, one thing that my town is pretty small. Like, I don't even know how you compare it to Jeddah. It's, I don't know, maybe not even a quarter, maybe much smaller. And when my parents were around my age or younger, it was even smaller. It was a collection of some very, like, 10, 15 families that all knew one another. And that was just how small it was, to the point where if someone had lights on, it meant they had an event, and anyone is welcome to come by. You just put lights up. It's like, hey, come by, I have a wedding. That was it.
No need for WhatsApp groups. I like that, like having these small town, small things. Like if you're traveling at night and you see a village that have one of the houses have light on in it, so it's probably some occasion is happening there, and most likely they will let you in and have you as their guest.
Yeah, my grandmother used to say that on weekends, if they stepped out of the house and saw that some neighbor somewhere had lights, they'd go back in, get dressed, and then just go over and see what they have and what's happening.
This is literally, hey, I just saw the lights on.
Yeah, pretty much. Then we have hospitality.
All right, go ahead with that.
Yeah. Like the desert tribes, the people of the cities and lowland settlements believe an honorable person must be hospitable. Al-Hadar make much of welcoming visitors at the city gates, even strangers. In practice, however, individual city dwellers do not feel as great a sense of duty towards a stranger as they do towards a guest they know. Often, Al-Hadar may discharge his responsibility to be hospitable by directing an unfamiliar or somewhat displeasing face to the nearest mosque or hospice. Though the man has not welcomed the stranger into his own house, the town has welcomed the stranger, and that is what truly counts. A known traveler, however, is almost always welcomed by Al-Hadar. Guests who have been invited into a city dweller's house receive the same respectful treatment as an honored guest of Al-Badia. On the first eve of a guest arrival, a great feast is laid out, often above the means of the host. If the guest remains on the second and third evenings, smaller meals ensue. The atmosphere is festive. The traveler tells of his or her journeys, and family members or hired minstrels provide further entertainment. On the third morning, the guest is expected to depart. The guest may leave a gift of some type if he or she is so inclined, but this is not required. If a guest has no other business in the city, the host may request assistance with the family business, making deliveries, carrying messages, minding the stall, and so forth. This often exposes the traveler to a number of different professions. Occasionally, a wanderer will arrive in town, become intrigued with a particular craft, and remain as an artisan. Adventurers, on the other hand, have often discovered that immersion in such a routine interferes with their deeds of glory. Rather than become a glorified messenger for their host, they stick to inns and hospices. As long as a guest is working on behalf of a host, the host is responsible for the guest's actions. In turn, the guest may not shame or endanger the host in any way. The guest may not steal from the host or the host comment. I'm sorry, but the fact that this is just mentioned.
They have to mention this.
I know.
Because you know the players.
I know. That's why I'm laughing. Nor may the guest draw a weapon, except in defense of the host. Such are the rules of hospitality. More like rules of decency. But yeah, I mean, in real life, you wouldn't need to mention, yeah, this person has welcomed you here. Don't steal from them.
Well, I think the concept here is that once somebody has you as a guest, don't dishonor them. Like, it's not about stealing from them only. It's your actions. Like, if you're gonna plan to rob someone, don't be someone's guest. Just go find the place and don't cause embarrassment to people.
Yeah, I'm laughing at it, but honestly, it needed to be said.
All right, tolerance. Hospitality is closely related to a city dweller's willingness to be tolerant. A guest need not share the beliefs or racial heritage of the host to be accepted and welcomed. Indeed, a fellow Zakharan with varying religious or social beliefs, who venerate a different enlightened god or comes from a different part of the civilized world, can count on several evenings of lively discourse, but nothing worse. Visitors to the Pantheist League frequently encounter exceptions to this rule. See Chapter 9. I honestly like how this specific place is the extreme zone. And I want to play that a lot. Like, it's not the whole culture. This specific place is just a bit too extreme.
Exception.
Yeah. Though agreement among civilized people may be uncommon, if not rare, tolerance of other ideas is in effect a Zakharan tradition. Tolerance does have its limits, however. In general, it extends to those who profess a belief in the words of the lawgiver, a belief in the authority of the Grand Khalif of Hudud, and a belief in a god or gods. Regardless of type, an individual who does not believe in some higher divinity is viewed with suspicion and perhaps even hostility. A lack of belief indicates that a person also lacks the moral anchor that separates civilized folk from barbarians. To Al-Hadar, It is better to believe in an antithetical position or a competitive God than to believe in nothing at all. Unbelievers can expect to be denied hospitality by most, to be sent on their way by many, and to be verbally or physically attacked by righteous few. A wise unbeliever, it can be said, keeps his or her philosophy private. So, I don't remember who said this, but how can you be an unbeliever when in Pharaoh gods literally walk the earth? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like
I mean,
atheism does not work well there.
yeah,
You can choose to hate them,
yes,
but
but you can't
you can't
choose to not
believe
believe
they
them
don't exist.
when like the person next to you, the cleric goes, "Hey, look at this! Look at my magic! What the hell?" Yeah.
So Brooke says Zakhara is probably the most tolerant society in second edition. Most settings had a ton of religious or racial strife. So yeah, we kind of received a few of them in 5e, but I do like this. Nobody cares what kind of race you are. Just be a good person.
Yeah.
This kind of mentality, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But having this religious differences, it's a good way to create tension in the setting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something you can dilute enough to be so because of the tolerance, you can dilute it enough to, if you don't want to use it, it's not there. Just keep them away from the Pantheon League.
Yeah,
they'll be
it's
fine.
fine. One area is that weird place, fine. But I do think it's more fun to play out tension in a way that serves story and serves for the joy of the players more than, tension for extremism's sake.
I don't plan to have such things in my game where if you have to believe in the enlightened gods or all these things, except for the Pantheon, because that's their whole thing. But anywhere else, or the individuals, the people, the common people, they don't care really. And even if you talk about being an unbeliever or whatever, it's up to you. It's not going to cause you any issues, and again, unless you are in the Pantheon. Because they are the extreme crazy people, and I want to upplay that.
Yeah. I might choose to dial based on each city, and it'll be in a way that makes sense. But yeah, only the Pantheon would have that extras.
All right. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yeah. And I think with that we can wrap up half of the chapter too. Okay. So, respect for authority. Al-Hadara's notion of what is civilized and what is to be tolerated harkens back to the recognition of the Grand Caliph's ultimate authority. This is something of a paradox. All civilized men recognize the greater authorities who help bind them into a cohesive realm called the Land of Fate. Yet, each city-state or island nation often feels a great independence from the rest of Zakhara, and frequently a sense of superiority. Distance accounts in parts for this attitude. Zakhara's outposts are far-flung. That distance, coupled with tolerance on the part of the Grand Khalif, gives local rulers a fairly free hand in attending to the demands of their communities. The basic independence of the Zakharan people also plays a role in establishing this regional autonomy. Like Al-Badia, many Al-Hadar are accustomed to choosing their own rulers. If rulers and the authorities who accompany them are unfit, few commoners have qualms about removing them. A leader's position is based on an informal contract between the leader and the people he or she leads. The people agree to follow a chief or to honor the ruling of a qadi or a religious authority. In return, the leader is expected to make choices that are wise and fair to the people. Among al-Badia, who choose their sheikh for their merit and not necessarily for their bloodlines, this democratic respect for authority is at its finest. Among al-Hadar, however, the bureaucracy is well entrenched, overseeing trade routes, collecting taxes, and keeping records that span generations. In theory, the Grand Khalif can choose his successor from among his sons, naming the most competent. But the past 5 generations, only the eldest son has succeeded his father. In keeping with this tradition, a local ruler regularly chooses his eldest son as successor and grooms him accordingly. Local rulers who are female, however, have already broken with tradition. Often, they choose whichever successor they deem fit. Okay. Further down in the hierarchy of power, beneath the courts of kings, caliphs, and emirs, a more democratic form of rulership occurs. On local level, the qadis are arbitrators and mediators, as noted above. They are chosen in one of 2 ways, by the community or by the ruling bureaucracy. The common people frequently view the latter group with suspicion, for the goals of bureaucracy do not always coincide with the desires of the people. A community often ignores the ruling of judges they don't respect. Qadis who fail to earn this respect are usually removed from office.
Right. How many pages left? 1, 2.
Quite a lot.
No. So we'll just wrap it up here.
Yeah.
The thing about qadis, I like the point that they don't trust them if they were chosen by the government instead of being elected by the community.
Yeah.
So I would imagine there would be a town, like this is probably the 5th qadi they have assigned, and every time people just harass them until they leave or they get removed.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Overall, I think this chapter brings up a lot of nice, fun points to play with. Does give you a bit of a deep dive into general daily life. The only thing I would do if I were to look at this is I wish it was organized in an easier to reference and an easier to use fashion. But I do think it's offering a lot of fun and interesting things. In fact, there are points that I would have wanted maybe even more detail, maybe not the tax part, but, the other things.
And I need to work on this magical item that drives you crazy.
Oh yeah, I think that one is going to be highly useful, and that is a fun side quest.
Yeah, and they would have no idea, except, well, my players are watching this, but you get the idea.
Yeah, even better, bonus points if a player wears it without knowing what it's for.
I have a feeling if one of my players actually saw this, they would intentionally do it. They would knowingly put their character in this position.
Yeah. Yep. You're like, wait, maybe this causes insanity. Maybe that's the one.
Oh, that's a great idea. Like he's actually was supposed to be a qadi, and he's on a quest to drive himself crazy.
Yes.
He probably got himself with a pact and to become a warlock. Like dude, whatever it takes.
No. Even better. He goes and seeks a wizard to cast Feeble Mind on him. but make it permanent, okay? Or he goes every month. Every month he has this trip, because I think it lasts a certain amount of time. So every time it's about to end, he starts to get his bearings back. He's like, oh, I must, business trip, gotta go.
Let me check if Feeble Mind is, I think there is a save for it.
Yeah.
So and at the end of every 30 days, can repeat the saving throw.
Yeah, so if he succeeds, then he goes like, I gotta find him again and get Feeble Mind.
And I imagine like he has to go through this headache just to. Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, that was our read for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully next week we will finish the chapter. Hopefully, but we don't know the exact time yet because tomorrow might be Ramadan or the day after. Is it tomorrow? They did not announce it yet.
I heard so many people say that it's going to be Tuesday, and I feel like I've mentally accepted Tuesday already, but I don't think they announced anything yet.
Yeah, it's Ramadan. Okay, let's see the announcement. Gulf News. Moon sight in Dubai, the moon sighting committee in the kingdom and Sayyid al-Qadr will meet tonight. They will meet tonight.
Okay.
So we will see.
I guess I will stay up and find out. But either way, Ramadan Kareem.
Ramadan Mubarak to everyone as well.
Yes, and hope to see you all next week.
Inshallah. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.